Hey there, Nick here. In this video, we're going to go over a pretty big recent addition to my Dotfiles, one of which is finally switching over to zshell, and I also created an installation script that makes it really easy to get set up with my Dotfiles if you're using Debian, Ubuntu, or some type of derivative, as well as any other distro of Linux, and even Mac OS. So I actually now have a MacBook Pro in my possession, although I didn't buy it with my own dime, and I have no intentions to switching to Mac OS, but I do contract work for my primary job, and one of my clients sent me over a MacBook Pro to do some mission critical work. They just happened to issue out company laptops, and I wanted a very quick way to get my Dotfiles up and running there, so I figured now is a great time to make that installation script, and here we are. And it's all right now up and available on my Dotfiles here, and I'll leave a link to this one in the description. So as for switching to zshell, I don't know why I spent so long not switching to it, because I feel like I've been missing out for so many years. Like, for example, when you do something like CD here, I have the auto suggestion plugin set up with zshell, where you can see there's a grayed out path there. All I have to do now is just hit the right arrow to complete that path. Like, that alone is worth using zshell for sure. It's been saving me so much time. Also, another really awesome thing about this is, like, if you just start typing some path here, and let's say you just do like GitHub instead of GitHub, and you go to tab complete that, then zshell is going to fix your typo. And as long as you don't go completely crazy and put something that doesn't even resemble the word, it's actually pretty good, and it's definitely helping me out in my day-to-day. Another plugin that I installed here for zshell is one that does syntax highlighting for commands. Like, for example, if I do like docker container --help or whatever, or any command, right, you can just see we're starting to get syntax highlighting. And if I put in, any command here, we can see that we get no difference. However, if we put in like a binary that doesn't exist, then look at that. We can see right away that, hey, this program doesn't exist, and it turned red, which is quite nice. Also, I made another change here to my prompt where if the last command that you run happens to exit with any other code other than 0, then we can see here that the $sign turns red. But if I run a successful command, then it just turns over to white. Technically, that would have worked with bash as well. But yeah, we're going to go over some of that stuff real quick here when I go over my zshell RC file. But keep in mind, this video is not going to be like a deep dive into all my configuration for zshell and stuff like that, because I've been only using this for a couple of weeks. And on that note, those two plugins that I have are the only two that I have installed. Would be curious to hear your suggestions. Like, what are some like guaranteed must-have like zshell plugins? I didn't want to load things up immediately off the bat because, if you've been following this channel, I do like to keep things pretty speedy and minimal and efficient. I just don't want to have a prompt that takes like, 5 hours to open or a new shell to open. And yeah, I just don't want to have things bloated out. But yeah, so far so good. Things are going quite nicely because, if I launch something like tmux here, my prompt, it's still, or, every time I open a new shell, it's basically immediately. The color up plugin, I forget the name of it, but it does add a tiny bit of type delay, but I think the benefits are well worth it. Yeah, so I'm quite happy with the way things there are. Now, as for, yeah, the zshell here, I mean, we can go into, and by that, like, my Vim setup didn't change, by the way, but now that Neo Vim 0.5 is out, well, maybe it's time to give that a look. But yeah, in this config folder here, now there's a zshell directory where I do have zshrc here. Yes, I understand I could have totally did a Control P here to do this, but since this is a new addition to my Dotfiles, I just wanted to show you where it is in the directory. But yeah, this file right now, as I learn a completely new shell environment, I try to keep it to be set to mostly defaults. But then I just started adding my own customizations here for like some history settings. And this part here is the prompt that there is a one-liner here. Yeah, this little fun thing right here where if we select that there, yeah, so this will turn the $sign white or red depending on if the last command failed or not. So that's basically like a one-liner shell script there. Yeah, not going to really peel that one apart. Other than like, it took me, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes to get the syntax right, but now it's all set up and I'm really happy. And yeah, this for the git prompt, yeah, definitely had that in my old shell setup, but this one's actually quite a bit more improved because if you're in a very, very long branch name, then it will truncate that branch once it gets to be over 30 characters with a ... So this one company that I do contract work for, they tend to have pretty long branch names where, there's like ticket IDs in the front and certain naming conventions. And, I just didn't want to open up a new prompt and then like have my actual cursor like over here because the branch name is like, like 45 characters long or 100 characters long or something crazy like that. And I'm definitely going to do future videos where we kind of pick this config apart just on like something more specific, right? Like getting the git prompt all working. Like we can definitely do like a 10-minute video on that one. But yeah, this is like basically the high level overview of this config here. It is all up on my Dotfiles if you want to check it out. Most of these commands here or just the basics of what you'll get with zshell out of the box. I did add some custom bindings here to make sure my home and end keys work. So if I am inside of tmux, then previously without those bindings, if I just like type a command like this and I hit the end key or the home key, it wasn't bouncing me to the beginning and ending of the line. Now, in another video, I mentioned that, hey, you know what, you can also do like Control A and Control E, like that totally works. But, you know, just out of habit, once in a while, I do hit the home and end keys. And I just found out that without these custom binds here, that wasn't working with zshell, at least not with my tmux config. And, you know, there's some other stuff here as well. Again, maybe in future videos, we'll go over some of this stuff. But honestly, a lot of this stuff really didn't change that much going from bash to zshell. Like, for example, like I'm still using asdf to run some programming runtime versions, you know, when I'm not using Docker. Same thing with the WSL2 stuff. It's all basically the same here. WSL1, TTY stuff. Yeah, this is all stuff that you've probably seen in some of my videos here, but you know, at the bottom here, you can see I'm loading all of my zshell plugins here, which is really just, you know, the fast syntax highlighting. There was another alternative one that had more stars in GitHub, but I chose this one because it seems to be quite a bit faster, and it also seemed to color things up a little bit nicer. Then for auto suggestions, yeah, that's the one where, you know, you can just start typing in some path or whatever. It doesn't need to be a path. It's basically any command. But yeah, I really can't speak highly enough of this one. This plugin alone, yeah, you don't realize it until you haven't been using it, but as soon as you do, it's like you can really autocomplete things so much faster, and yeah, it's amazing. So as for like handling zshell plugins, I know there is a deep rabbit hole where there's like 100 different plugin managers. What I actually ended up doing was I just wrote my own little shell script here, like update zshell plugins, and it's a very simple bash script here, and all it does is either pull down an update if you happen to already have the plugin installed. Otherwise, it'll go and just get clone it here, and then you can just have your list of plugins on the bottom. You know, whether or not I'll actually use a zshell plugin manager, I don't know. I didn't want to really go and spend a ton of time researching that when something this simple works, because now it's like if I just want to add a new zshell plugin, I come here and then I just put in the GitHub, the owner name, as well as the repo itself, and that's it. So yeah, until this pattern actually fails, then I really have no intentions of using a plugin manager, unless you have some really good suggestions in the comments. Let me know below, right? I guess we're going for speed here. I don't want to have an intrusive a lot of delay or whatever when zshell opens. I also, you know, like mentioned before, I don't want to just load up my config or whatever with like 30 different zshell plugins, right? They all need to be super useful to keep them around. But now let's maybe just talk a little bit about the installation script. So this install script, it's pretty long, you know, it's a 300-line bash script, but I guess given everything that it does, it's really, really not that bad. And, you know, this video is not going to be like going over every single line, but, you know, we can totally run this thing, or I'll run this thing on video just so you can see how it works, right? So if I go to my .files repo now, somewhere here down here in the README file, it's going to be like quickly get set up with these Dotfiles, right? And this all may change, but all you have to do is copy paste this. And, you know, there is a big warning here. Well, not so big, but there is a warning. Basically, you know, if you're not comfortable just like blindly running a script on the internet, then totally just click the link there to install the script, and you can go and check it out before you install it, right? Because this path here to install the script is the exact path here for this command here. Now, I already have everything installed on my machine here, but what we can actually do here is just use the power of Docker to install these .files inside of a Docker container. Now, there's going to be a couple extra steps I need to do because it's running inside of Docker, and certain things don't work exactly the same, but it's like, you know, like a 95% good enough test. So I do have this one alias called drun. It's been in my .files for a long time, and all this one does here is, you know, I can just do, it's basically like a Docker run, IT, and then it sets up a volume, blah, 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 and it sets a working directory. So I'm just going to use the alias that I have available, and I'll just run the Debian base image, and I think it's Buster Slim, or is it Slim Buster? I always forget because I very rarely run the Debian image directly. I'm always using something like Python, or Ruby, or Elixir, or something else, but there we go. Okay, so I'm inside of a Docker container. Now, since I'm inside of Docker here, a couple of things need to happen. So the sudo command is actually not installed by default with Docker, so the first thing I need to do here is just apt-get update, and then apt install sudo, as well as curl, because curl's not installed by default in a Docker image. And again, you know, if you're installing this locally, you probably don't need to do this because these programs are going to be installed already. So once we have those dependencies ready to go, this will take, I don't know, a minute or 30 seconds or whatever to install. Then I can just jump back here, make sure I have this copied to my clipboard here. That's a really nice addition from GitHub, by the way. If you just have a little one-liner like there, like I didn't do anything special for that, that just pops up. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, Now my dependencies are ready. Now we can just install this straight like this. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to be like, hey, by the way, all these packages are going to be installed. And they're going to be installed using apt if you happen to be using Debian or Ubuntu or some type of derivative. And if you happen to be using macOS, it is going to use brew. It's also going to install brew for you if you don't have it installed. Now, if you are using a different distro of Linux, like Arch or something else, then I don't have all of that built in. So you can actually run this script here with a different flag where you can just do skip package installation. Technically, the flag name doesn't matter. You can just do -s skip and it's also the same. But when you do that, then the packages won't be installed and you can just go ahead and install these packages here using whatever package manager that you want. But I am going to install them. So let's do it like this. And yeah, it basically also says like, everything after Z shell here is optional. So like, GPG, HTAP, blah, blah, blah. These are all, kind of nice to have. I use these all the time, but not necessary to have them, to actually use my Dotfiles. But you will want to use things like tmux and gshell and Vim GTK there because we want clipboard support and other stuff. But yeah, okay, so let's go ahead and install this one. And this is going to take quite a bit, right? Because we have a lot of things to install, right? So if I jump back over to the other window here, well, it's not too many things, right? But all of these are going to be installed as well as all of these. And some of these have quite a lot of dependencies. So, jumping back to here, let me actually kill this one here. Why not? Yeah, this is going to take a while, so instead of just rambling and wasting your time, I am going to fast forward the video and I will meet you back when this part's done. And there we go, all the packages are successfully installed. And the first decision we need to make here is where do we want to clone the .files themselves? So by default, if you type in nothing, it is going to clone them to the .files directory in your home directory. But you can always put a custom path there if you'd like. I'm going to leave mine as the default because I like having them in the .files directory. You can totally change this later if you'd like, but keep in mind that there are going to be a number of symlinks created, and those symlinks are going to expect those sources to exist at this directory. So if you change those, you will need to update your symlinks. So you might as well pick a location that you really like. So let's go with that one there. And yeah, this is going to just now continue on running the install script. That's a little bit faster because we don't need to install a million things, but it is installing a number of things for you here. We can see all of these are labeled too, right? So it's like, where do you want to clone these .files to? You pick a location, cool. Then it's running like a git clone and putting those in the directory that you'd like. And then we can see also that we're installing some zshell plugins here. There's the one for auto suggestions and syntax highlighting. That's using the other script that we took a look at before. And then we can see also that we are installing TPM, the plugin manager for tmux, as well as FCF. So we can do like some fuzzy finding on the command line, as well as Vim. And then now it's getting to a potentially dangerous part where it is going to create some symlinks forcefully. And instead of just doing this by default like a maniac, which will actually like override files on your system, it will give you a prompt here to make sure this is like something you actually want to do. And the reason why this is dangerous is because we're going to be symlinking things from this .files directory that we just created, basically the thing that was just cloned down from the script, to a specific point on your file system. So if you already, for argument's sake, here had a zshell config file in the .config zshell directory, then your zshrc file would be overwritten by the symlink. And we can see here too, like for Vim, for tmux, and some other stuff as well, all of these things are going to be overridden. And if you happen to be using WSL, then this one would be as well for the WSL conf. Now, if you hit no here, basically the whole script will be aborted and you can go and figure out what you want to do. Technically, you can just let this hang here until you go back up your config files if you'd like. If you don't care about your configs, then you can just hit Y here to continue. So I'm going to do that now because there's nothing I want to back up. But yeah, there's some, text here that basically says there's no going back from this one, right? So definitely back up your configs if you're interested in that. But once you do that, then it's going to start installing some more tools, right? So there's asdf being installed. It's going to install the node plugin. And yeah, and the only reason I go down this route and installing Node here is because, yeah, one plugin just happens to use Node for Markdown preview. But in addition to this is a pretty neat part of the script. It does run like a Vim plug installer, whatever, inside of Vim itself, but that's like all programmatically happening from just a single command. And this error here about Groovebox is fine because it's like at that point in time, it wasn't available because it still needed to run a plug install. But just jumping back to this other terminal thing here, let me go back to Vim or going back to the install script, and we're going to take a look here about how that Vim thing just happened in the terminal from before. So yeah, there's a lot of instances of Vim here. So installing Vim plugins, yeah. So this is really neat, right? It's like you can actually control running commands from Vim from the command line. So you can just run Vim with the -e flag here, and it's like, what do you want to do here? Well, I want to run a plug install and then a quit all. And this command seems to always fail, so I just put the or true here just so the whole entire script doesn't halt. But yeah, pretty neat way just to run some commands. There's other ways to do this as well. I think with the -c flag, and then you can quote things and just run commands. But this seemed to be the most dependable way of doing it. But it was pretty cool. And yeah, everything eventually got installed here, including tmux and all the tmux plugins. So if I go to the install script here, yeah, we can see here installing tmux plugins. This also was like kind of a neat trick. So you don't need to like launch tmux and then do your leader key capital I to install your plugins. You can just run this one command here, and that is going to install all of your tmux plugins without actually having to launch tmux itself. But it does depend on this one tmux plugin manager path to exist. So it's funny because like these 2 lines of code, it's like so easy. Like you just export this environment variable and then you do this and you're done. And but yeah, this took like 15, 20 minutes because it went through like combing through GitHub issues, like how do I programmatically install tmux plugins without like launching tmux and creating like a dummy session just to do it. And yeah, so there's that. And now we are at the very end here, and it says, hey, cool, like everything was installed successfully. Go head over to the GitHub page here to check, one thing you might want to do. You can click that link here, and let me just zoom in here. And it's like, yeah, did everything install successfully? Nice. Like, the first thing you might want to do now is configure your Git name and email, right? So there is a file here in your home directory now that has a dummy name in there. So when you do your Git commits, it's going to be like Cody McCodepants or whatever I put in there. So you might want to change that. And then also you can just, do some checks here to make sure everything is installed successfully. So like if I run a git config list here, and by the way, the first thing it says to do here, right, is like, close the terminal and then open up a new terminal. And then by default, like zshell is going to be all ready to go and perfect. But since I'm inside of a Docker container, I'm actually going to run zshell here, and we're going to see some errors, which is fine. The reason these errors happen is because in a regular environment, your z profile file would be loaded up. But with Docker, that doesn't work. So what I end up doing is I just go to my config zshell z profile here, and I just source it manually. And also let me just source my zshrc file here. And now all these errors and warnings should go away and everything is good to go. So if I start typing, I don't know, like cd temp or whatever, and I just start typing cd here, we can see the temp is all automatically set up and ready to go. I don't know why the color isn't quite as nice as my regular terminal here, but it's probably something to do with Docker. I'm just noticing because on a regular system, like on my Chromebook that's running native Linux, all the stuff worked completely fine, as well as Mac OS, and it's also working fine on my current system. So yeah, there's some wonky colors inside of Docker, but I wouldn't worry about stuff like that. You can also see the syntax highlighting, or the command highlighting is also working completely fine. If I try to run that, we can see our prompt also changes to red. And keep in mind, like I'm inside the container, right, as a root user for this host name here. So yeah, everything is working nicely. Now there are some, I can also launch tmux here too, right, with my same binds, and everything works great. We can see there's the Git repo part of the prompt also working fine. Copy paste, it's all good. Now there is one funky thing here. If you're doing this inside of Docker, there's certain things in my vimrc file that well, actually let me go to my .files in my home directory here, just so we can take a look at this. And I guess I'll do my vimrc. But yeah, there's like some weirdness going on here with colors. I don't know, it has something to do with the Docker container. So if you're screwing around, this is not what things are going to look like on the regular machine, because, as we see here, this is the typical Groovebox setup with everything up and running. So yeah, it is a little bit, a little bit weird inside of Docker, but, maybe there's some edge cases I can iron out. I didn't want to optimize for that because typically you're installing this on, a regular Debian or Ubuntu machine or Mac OS or whatever. Not so much inside of a Docker container. But yeah, it's all ready to go here. If you find any bugs, please open an issue. I'll do my best to fix all of them. So on that note, if you have any questions about any of this, let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer all of your questions. Yeah, if you see any ways to improve anything, again, please call it out, because I'm always looking to make the best solution possible. I have no ego when it comes to stuff like this. On that note, thanks a lot for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, because it does help a lot. I will see you in the next video.